name is Czyz. I am a Director of Curriculum and Instruction in the Stafford Township School District, which is in New Jersey. Up until a couple of months ago, I had no idea that this conference existed. Stafford Township is near Long Beach Island, LBI, if anyone is familiar with the area, down toward the Jersey Shore. And I myself actually live in Pennsylvania. I live in a very small town in Bucks County called Morrisville. It's about 1 square mile, so if any of you are familiar with the area. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about small data and how to effectively use it to guide instruction in the classroom. So I was thrilled this morning when I was watching the presentation and Jamie first got up and showed the video of a teacher using formative assessment in the classroom. And that's mainly going to be the focus of how teachers can utilize formative assessment in the classroom using a couple of different tools. So first I'd like to get a little bit of an idea of my audience today. So how many district level administrators do I have in the room? Okay. How many building level administrators? How many teachers? A couple. Okay. Normally I give this presentation to teachers, so we're going to see how it goes. Okay. And then how many data specialists do I have in the room? Okay. Anybody else that I missed? All right. So first thing is first. So I'm going to try this. This is one of those things where you just have to trust me. So you've been in here for a couple of minutes and you're making a judgment on me. You can trust me. I'll let you know that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by playing ultimate rock, paper, scissors. Is there anyone in the room who does not know how to play rock, paper, scissors? Okay, perfect. Here's how this is going to work. In about a minute, I'm going to ask you to stand up. You're going to introduce yourself to someone you do not know. You're going to play rock, paper, scissors. And just for reference, it's rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Okay? Those are the rules that we'll go by. Very serious in my world of RPS. So we're going to play rock, paper, scissors. Find someone you don't know. You play them one round, rock, paper, scissors, shoot. The winner moves on and finds somebody else to play, somebody else who has won. The loser, this is the key part. The loser has to follow the person that they lost to and becomes their cheerleader. So you've got to stand behind them and cheer for them. Okay? So you've got to remember names here. All right? Does everybody think they can handle this? All right, I'm a teacher at heart, so who can repeat what they're going to do right now? Anyone? Go ahead.
Stand up, find someone you don't know, play rock, paper, scissors. After the scissors is the shot. You win, you move on. You lose, you follow the person and cheer them on.
Correct. And we're going to play until we have one winner in the room. And I have a prize for the winner as well. So, and I'm going to film all this also. Okay? We're going to see how long this takes. Are you ready? Okay, go ahead. Is that our winner? All right. I absolutely love to start off with that activity. Hopefully that will be the most fun thing that you do during your 3 days here. And I want to thank Jenny Majera. She is an educator out of Chicago. I attended a session with her last summer, and she kind of gave us that idea. So I want to thank her for that idea. And then the other thing is actually, I am a former 5th grade math teacher. So rock, paper, scissors was integral to how I taught probability in the classroom. Okay, so here, if you actually click, you'll see a recording sheet. So you can actually use that with students. All right, so lost my mouse. There is it. Okay. So I'm going to start with some data. So here's a graph. I found this one online, classroom teaching, and you can see some of the different things that are there. And some of it I agree with. Some of it I do not agree with. So for example, in a teacher's day, this portion might be dealing with parents. I don't know that it's all dealing with parents. There is one major thing on this graph that I disagree with, and it is this red section here. So about 30% of a teacher's day, and if you can't see the red portion, what it says is testing, data analysis, meetings, and meetings about meetings. Okay. And I agree with the testing portion and the meetings about meetings, because I sit in them every day. The piece that I disagree with is the data analysis piece. And this is something that I don't think enough of our teachers are doing. And I don't think it's their fault. I think we have inundated them with data to the point that they feel overwhelmed. I know I do it in my own district for my own teachers. But it becomes an issue of, what do I do with all this data? How do I analyze it? And more importantly, how do I take that data to then make instructional changes in my classroom? And for me, that is the biggest point of this, is you can have all the data in the world, but is it making an impact in classrooms for students? So that's really what I'm going to talk about today, is how to utilize some of that formative data within the classroom. Okay, so triple Venn diagram here, and the point that we really want is improved learning outcomes for our students. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this as we go along, but meaningful data has to be used properly, okay? And I think that's where a lot of our teachers kind of struggle with using it. But more importantly, it is a knowledge of students along with that data that also helps. And I'll tell a quick story. I am in charge of our Gifted and Talented program in our district. It's our Excite program, and every summer I have the privilege of sending out our letters to all of our students who are invited into our Gifted and Talented program. And then I also have the privilege of taking all of those phone calls from all of the parents whose children did not get into the Gifted and Talented program. So every summer I do that. I know that if I'm going to send out the letters on a Monday, that my Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is just going to be full of phone calls. So last summer, sent the letters out, and we base our student entry on multiple kind of assessment pieces. We utilize our state standardized test scores. Previously, we were using the New Jersey ASK, which is our standardized test. Now we're moved to PARC at this point. We also use report card data from our students. We use teacher recommendations, and we use parent recommendations as well. So last summer, I get a phone call from a mom, and anytime I talk to a parent, I like to find out beforehand what caused this child to miss getting into the program. So I looked at the girl's data beforehand. She had the teacher recommendation. She had the parent recommendation. She had straight A's on her report card. And the thing that kept her out of the program for us was the test data. So she had a very low score on her 4th grade state assessment. And we use a matrix system, so it awards points, and I put all the data into the system, and then it spits out a list at the end. So I took the phone call, and I talked to mom, and of course, what does she tell me? The night before the test, the family dog died. Right? So I went back, I looked at her 3rd grade scores, I looked at her previous report cards, straight A student, top of the line student all the way through, and of course I let her into the program. But I tell this story because it is not simply those data points that mean anything to that child in particular. Okay? So yes, it is using multiple data points, but it's also having a knowledge of what that child is going through. their strengths and needs as well. So, how can a teacher utilize formative assessment data within the classroom? I believe there are 7 steps to success. And as we go through, we're going to go through all 7 of these. But this is really a system that a teacher can utilize to generate data within the classroom. I know that we have a lot of other data that they may see. They may not know necessarily what to do with that data, but this will help them generate some additional things within their classroom. How many of you were next door for Lower Marion's presentation this morning? They talked a little bit about how do we take those conferences and those conversations that we're having with kids, and how do we kind of turn those into data points. And I believe this will help a little bit. So I'm going to start with step 1 and step 2. And I'm going to take a very basic example that I'm going to carry through the presentation. So step 1 is to really utilize assessments that are truly reflective of what you're teaching. So they made the same point next door this morning that a lot of teachers don't necessarily teach the standards, right? They might be teaching something like a butterfly unit that they're very comfortable teaching, but it might not necessarily align to standards. And I ask this question of my teachers all the time. We aligned our math program to the Common Core standards, and we said we bought a book, and we have Go Math, which is a nice math book, but it doesn't necessarily cover all the standards. So I ask my teachers, how often are you changing your assessments? So they print out their tests, they give it to the students, and a lot of times they are taking questions off of the test because they haven't necessarily covered it, because it's not in the standards. Okay? So the first thing is we have to understand what it is we're assessing. Are we truly assessing what we need to be assessing with objectives and standards? And then the second point is to use a pretest in order to do that. So we want to pull in some of that data in order to guide our instruction. Once you have that pretest assessment data, you can utilize that to guide your instruction. I might decide that I'm going to skip the first 3 lessons because all of my students have it at that point. So the example I'm going to use is a 4th grade class who is studying their multiplication facts. This is as simple and objective as we could find. How many of you are familiar with Google Forms? Okay. So we utilize Google Forms a lot to do this. And I think what that allows us to do is to really kind of quantify the data that the teacher is looking at in the classroom. And then how many of you are familiar with the coherence map, which comes from Achieve the Core? Okay, if you are not, let me just show you this real quick. Okay. And again, this is for math. But you have all of your different grade levels for the core standards. And when you look at this, it actually gives you the standard. And then what's kind of nice about it is it looks at all of the standards that come before and after it and how they link. So what we do with our teachers is we actually have them look at this map to figure out where it is that their students are coming from in terms of what they've learned. And we have really tried to align our district standards to these coherent maps. Okay, so it's an excellent, excellent resource. Okay. So if you have not used Google Forms before, there are some different sites here, and I'll go to this one, where you can actually just create a template. So step 3 is to really save time within classrooms. And I think that is probably, when you look at that first chart, that is probably what our teachers struggle with most, is time management. We continue to shove more things into the day without taking anything off the table. So if we can find things that are going to help those teachers manage their day and really help them to save time, I think it's going to help them to better analyze data. So I'm going to show you in a second a tool called Flubaroo. How many of you are familiar with Flubaroo? Okay, a handful of people. So what Flubaroo does is it's a self-grading tool that allows you, once you create that Google form, to automatically grade and assess the survey. And then really, number 4 is having those teachers make data a part of their daily routine. Just a quick thumbs up, thumbs down. How many of you have your teachers analyze data on a, let's say, a weekly basis? Thumbs up if you have your teachers analyze data on a weekly basis. Okay. How is that being done? Those of you that are thumbs up.
Weekly team meetings.
Okay, so team meetings. Is anybody using anything else?
We use the information gathered from, like for the information data by our TAs.
Okay.
They've gathered when they meet with the teachers also to say how they're doing in their intervention groups.
Okay, all right. So you're using intervention data as well. Any other ways that you're having teachers analyze? Okay. Another great way to do this, and I know this came up this morning, when Pedro was talking about his son, right? And his son came home and he wanted to monitor his own fluency. And I'm a data guy at heart as well. If only we all had that child at home. I have one of those children at home, one of my 3, and she's the same way. She wants to know exactly how she's doing on all her tests. She wants feedback. I want to know what I got wrong, how I can improve. So student self-monitoring and analysis should be a part of every classroom. And what's great about Google Forms is students can actually utilize that information as well to guide their own instruction. And one of the best strategies that I've ever seen a teacher do, and this was the same thing, they were teaching multiplication facts. They're having their students practice every day. So they were using Communicator. They would put their sheets in the Communicator. They would write with a dry erase marker on there, and they would practice the same facts on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then on Friday, they would pull that paper out of the Communicator. They would get a pencil, and they would actually do it by hand. And then the teacher would call out the answers real quick, and the students would write down what their score was. Then the most important piece was this right here. So each week, the student was tracking their own progress. They're monitoring their own progress. Okay? And that was also poster size in the room. So it became a huge classroom competition. Which student was going to get there first? And eventually, all the students kind of mastered it because they were practicing it every day. They were assessing their own information. They're assessing themselves on their learning objectives, and they eventually got it. So that's a great way to have students self-monitor and be included in that process as well. All right, now, go ahead, question.
Is there a way for the students to do that on the Google form instead of?
Yeah, so you can actually create and share with Google Forms to your students. How many of you are using Google Classroom? Okay, Google Classroom is a great tool as well. What that allows you to do is to create a quiz and then share it with all of your students. So they can actually have their own version of the quiz, and they can track their data on a weekly basis. So if they're taking that quiz every week, no matter what it is, if it's multiplication facts, if it's any other types of information where they can put in their answers, they can actually track their own data on a weekly basis. So Google Classroom is an excellent way to do that. Now this is the key step, because this is what I think our teachers are missing at this point, is now that I have that information, what do I do with it? So when our teachers, so we've talked about data meetings that we're having our teachers meet at. What decisions do they make at those meetings? What are they deciding to do? Change instruction. How? Okay, so based on students' needs, like what would they be deciding to do though? Targeted instruction, possibly. Other ideas? Hmm?
How to group them? I mean, certain kids may not be getting certain things. What to review and teach.
Yeah, so you may make grouping decisions there. This is where it becomes key to have established actions set up. Okay? So you first want to identify whatever your clear-cut criteria is. So what number is a student going to have to get in order to start some of those actionable steps? Okay? So in my example, I'm going to red flag any student that scores below 80% on that fact test. All right? It's just an arbitrary number. All right? We can debate whether that's a real number or not. Just an arbitrary number. So I'm going to say any student who is 80% or above has passed that test and is going to move on to the next objective. I'm okay with 80%. Anyone who is less than 80% is automatically going to trigger some actionable steps. And I think this is the key that teachers are missing, is what type of support am I going to provide for those students? So in this case, I need to know automatically, as soon as those students don't hit that 80%, what am I, as the teacher, going to do for them? All right. So in this case, I might say my interventions are, I'm going to give them flashcards, or I'm going to make them make flashcards for any facts that they got wrong. So now this is where monitoring their own data can be important. They can now go back and say, you know what, I got all of my 9s wrong. I've got to make flashcards for that. And my expectation as the teacher is I'm going to expect them to study those flashcards for a week, and then I'm going to figure out where they're at. Or I may give them daily practice online. So I might give them a specific website to try, but it has to be tied to those red flags. I need to know what supports I'm going to give that student. Okay? All right, and then finally, the last step is providing a timeline for reassessment. Okay, so this is a key piece as well. And I think this is also where our teachers struggle, because we teach an objective, we have students who get it, we have students who don't, we provide support, and then we move on, right? Because of, again, time. How much time do we have in a day to make sure that we're really mastering content? So here is really making sure that you're establishing that timeline for reassessment. So if after a week, I want to see that the student knows those facts, I know I've already put into place my interventions. So if that support was flashcards that the student was going to be working on, or it was maybe a website or something else, some other type of intervention strategy that I've already had in place, and now after a week, I'm going to retest that student. And this is, again, where students monitoring their own, this is why Google Forms is great, because you could just tell a student, okay, go back on, retake the test now, and then I can see exactly where they're at in a week's time. Now this is where it gets crazy, right? Because here's what this looks like. If a student scores the 80%, it's very linear, right? They just move on. If they don't, this is where it becomes crazy for a teacher. So now this is just one child in the class. I've got 25 children in the classroom. This is why we need to make it easier for teachers. But if that student scores below that 80%, then I've got to start my intervention process. So maybe it's flashcards, maybe it's a website. I might decide that after the flashcards, that student is fine and I'm going to retest. Or I might send them to another intervention and then have them retest. Now after I retest, they're either going to score above that target mark again, or they're going to score below. And if they score above, fine, I move them on to the next objective. If not, I'm providing more interventions. Now where this gets completely overwhelming for teachers is, this is all while I've already started on the new objectives for certain students. This is all while I'm providing interventions for all those students in my classroom. So the more manageable we can make that for teachers, the better off we're going to be. Okay, and then finally, and I'll walk you through this step, How many of you have heard of flippity.net? Okay. No one in the room? That's awesome. So you're going to learn something new. So if anything, you're walking out of here practicing your rock, paper, scissors skills, and then with flippity.net as well. So flippity.net is an awesome tool that uses Google Sheets. How many of you would consider yourselves experts at Excel? Okay, one. All right, how many of you, because I consider myself an expert at Excel, but I always say I only know like 30% of what Excel can actually do, right? So Google Sheets is kind of the cool way to utilize data sheets for students. So let me show you what it does. Okay, somebody was smart enough to create this, and let me just go back for a second. So what flippity.net does is it allows you to take a Google spreadsheet and turn it into something really cool. So the first one they started with were these flashcards. And what the flashcards do is students can use these as well. They can create their own. But it actually creates these online flashcards for students. And they build them through Google Sheets. And when they take their flashcards, they flip them over, it tells them what their answer is, right? So this could also be another intervention that you have students doing, okay? So the other thing that they came up with Flippity is a badge tracker. So now what's nice about this program, same thing. I'm just going to make a copy of it into my Google Drive. And what this does is it manages online digital badges for students. So if you have your students who are going through their different interventions during the year, or they're trying to meet their objectives, you might have a badge for, let's say, Math Fact Champion. Okay? And then what happens here is you put all your badges in, however you're creating them. I created mine through Google Draw. Okay? And I can add that in. So here it is. So I'm actually going to take this. Very slow. And I'm going to publish to the web. And I'm going to get my link. And then I'm going to go back here to Flippity. Sorry, there it is. Okay. And it automatically generates some badges for you. I'm actually going to add one in on my own. So I'm going to delete this one. And I'm going to paste my badge that I put in. And I'm going to call it Math Champion. Okay. Now, what you can do is you can manage your students on this end. So now we can put in the information as to which badges they've earned to this point. And now this is where Flippity becomes really awesome. Because what it does is it publishes to the web. So it gives you directions here, file, publish to the web. I'm going to publish. Are you sure? Absolutely. And it's going to publish very slowly because it knows I'm waiting. Okay, then you're going to get your link. And then you paste that link right in this box. And then it tells you that your Flippity badges page is there. So now when I click on this, I have a list of all of my students, and I can see exactly which badges they have earned. So if I want to click on Alan, I can see that Alan has already earned his Math Fact Champion badge. Okay? So that's a way to kind of reward those students and make sure that they're kind of working toward that objective or goal. Okay, so again, 7 steps. Just making sure that you're really taking advantage of some of those self-monitoring tools. Utilizing a program like Flippity to kind of reward your students. The one big takeaway is make sure that your teachers have actionable steps. Right? They can have all the data in the world, but if they don't know what to do once they have that data, that becomes the key to kind of guiding that instruction within the classroom. Okay. Some additional resources. So for CLAC faculty, this is my website. You can find some additional information there about data analysis, about all kinds of other topics in education as well. My email, richchiz@gmail.com, and I'm on Twitter as well. So if you want to connect with me in any of those ways, if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or if you have individual questions, I'll be around for a few minutes. Anybody have any questions? Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.